Rust-red cranes over still water, granite steps carve a tidal canyon. In 1969, a brand new nuclear sub sank at the pier. This is Mare Island, America's first Pacific naval station, born in 1854. In minutes, we'll untangle 3 threads. BRAC politics that closed the yard in 1996, the stone Drydocks that made the impossible routine, and the USS Guitarro's cautionary tale. The yard didn't fail, the mission moved. So why did the whistles go silent? Picture the 1850s Carquinez Strait, fog lifting off the flats, masts thick as a forest. In 1853, the U.S. bought 956 acres on a low island opposite Vallejo. On September 16, 1854, the Navy opened its first permanent Pacific station. From day one, Mare Island was a machine for turning shoreline into sea power. Shipwrights lofted wooden frames, blacksmiths rang iron into shape, and by the 1880s, steam and steel had taken the yard into a new century. Wars kept the pace: Civil War refits, Spanish-American War expeditions, then 2 world wars that made the place roar. The yard built, repaired, and overhauled everything from river gunboats to ocean escorts, sending hulls back through the Carquinez Strait faster than anyone thought possible. And around the gate, a city grew to the rhythm of the whistle. Neighborhoods timed to shifts, diners timed to lunch bells, schools filled by the next generation of welders and riggers. What began as 956 acres became a West Coast cornerstone and the seed of Vallejo's identity. They called it Drydock No. 1, the first permanent stone dry dock on the U.S. West Coast. Blocks from Sierra quarries were dressed and fitted until the structure behaved like a single piece of masonry. Generations of crews learned its rituals. Keel blocks set, shores driven, lines checked, then the long exhale as the last water left the basin. Wooden gunboats gave way to steel cruisers, then destroyers and submarines, and the old stone canyon continued to operate, proof that good engineering endures over time. Even when newer facilities arrived, this dock remained the yard's granite heartbeat, a 19th century machine that let a 20th century Navy move faster. After World War II, Mare Island found its rhythm underwater. Diesel-electric fleet boats limped in from long patrols and left tight, quiet, and ready to dive again. Then came the nuclear era. The yard built and overhauled attack submarines, upgraded sonar and fire control brains, and learned the choreography of radiological controls that turned maintenance into 1,000 precise steps. Submarine work changes everything. Hull plating isn't just metal, it's stealth. A valve out of calibration isn't an annoyance, it's a risk at crush depth. Crews here learned to plan down to the fastener, tracking every gasket and gauge like an airline tracks its engines. The dock became a stage for the smallest decisions to matter. By the early 1960s, Mare Island also supported the missile age, Polaris boats cycling through for work that blended heavy steel with secrets. New nuclear construction at the yard ended in 1972, but complex overhauls carried into the 1990s, keeping the waterfront busy as the Pacific became the chessboard of the superpowers. Subs arrived, disappeared into the canyon of stone, and re-emerged changed. Quieter, sharper, tuned for a long blue silence. In those decades, Mare Island wasn't just fixing ships. It was a refreshing deterrence, one controlled pump down at a time. May 15, 1969. At a pier on Mare Island, the brand new submarine USS Guitarro, SSN 65, sits in the water mid-fit out. 2 work crews are aboard, one forward, one aft, running unrelated ballast tests. Valves open, tanks take on just a little more water, and the boat trims, then keeps trimming. Nobody has the whole picture. Lines creak. The pier edge rises in the viewports. The river slides over the deck. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens like a spreadsheet problem. You notice one cell too late. The forward team lightens, the aft team floods, the numbers don't meet in the middle. Water finds open hatches, equipment sparks, dies. Outside, sailors and yard workers fight to stabilize the hull, but gravity and tide win. The brand new submarine settles to the bottom beside her own pier. There's no reactor incident. There is a public embarrassment, millions in damage, and a bruising schedule hit. Divers and cranes bring her up on May 18th. The repair bill lands in the high teens, roughly 15 to 22 million, and the commissioning slips by about 32 months. When Guitarro finally joins the fleet on September 9, 1972, she carries a quiet addendum. In complex work, coordination isn't optional. Afterward, Mare Island preached that lesson. One yard, one voice, one plan, or the river writes its own. When the Cold War ended, the Pentagon faced a simple math problem with hard consequences. Too many bases for a shrinking fleet. To solve it, Congress built a process called BRAC, Base Realignment and Closure, a quasi-jury that weighed missions, costs, and future force needs, then made up or down recommendations that Washington would accept as a package. The idea was to put distance between local politics and national strategy. In 1993, Mare Island landed squarely on BRAC's ledger. On paper, the case looked unforgiving. Submarine construction had slowed, nuclear-era maintenance demanded expensive modernization, and other yards could do similar work. Commissioners sifted through binders that tallied mission overlap, environmental liabilities, and long-term overhead. The language was bloodless: excess capacity, force structure, life cycle cost. But the stakes in Vallejo were human: paychecks, mortgages, a city's identity. California's leaders fought back. Governor Pete Wilson, Senator Dianne Feinstein, and local officials argued the West Coast still needed a skilled submarine yard, and workers rallied by the thousands to make that point visible. Testimony filled hearing rooms, headlines filled breakfast counters. None of it moved the needle enough. BRAC wasn't asking whether Mare Island had history or heart. It asked whether, in the Navy's next chapter, this yard was still the cheapest, best-fitted place to do the work. The answer came quickly and publicly. Close it. The timeline followed. Operations wound down, and by early spring of 1996, the gate changed meaning, an industrial giant becoming a place between past and future. The irony is hard to miss. BRAC exists to make political decisions feel apolitical, yet the result lands with the force of politics all the same. For Mare Island, the verdict wasn't incompetence or scandal. It was arithmetic. Strategy plus budgets, minus nostalgia, rendered in a year when the fleet was smaller than the docks built to serve it. Shipyards leave fingerprints: solvents in soil, paint chips in the dirt, fuels in old sumps, PCBs sunk into mud. After 1996, Mare Island entered a long, parcel-by-parcel cleanup run under federal and state agreements. Instead of one Superfund label for the whole island, regulators carved it into manageable pieces. Test, cap, or remove, confirm, then transfer for reuse. Some areas needed dredging or engineered caps, others got soil excavation, vapor barriers under new buildings, and long-term groundwater monitoring wells that blink like metal daisies along the curbs. That checkerboard approach did two things at once. It kept people safe and let redevelopment move while tougher corners took more time. Clean parcels could become studios, shops, and housing. Hotspots stayed fenced until the data said otherwise. It isn't glamorous, and it never really ends. Stewardship is part of the inheritance. On Mare Island, the past is engineered into the present. One signed document, and one boring log at a time. When the whistles stopped in 1996, paychecks did too. Vallejo lost thousands of steady jobs in the clock that set its day. The shipyard's gates swung from security to silence, and plans poured in. Film shoots in cavernous shops, light industry in brick sheds, artist lofts, and housing where pipe racks once stood. Some wins came fast: leases, festivals, a museum, while other ideas stalled on permits, cleanup, or money that never quite lined up. Parcel by parcel, the island changed. Fabricators moved into crane bay cathedrals. Startups tested hardware in rooms built for torpedoes. Weekenders walked the waterfront along rails that once carried keels. The economy didn't bounce. It bent toward smaller employers, mixed uses, and a slower kind of growth. What the Navy built became a district with memory. Granite docks, numbered buildings, and a skyline of cranes reminding newcomers what this ground used to do and what it might do next. Let's separate the headline from the cause. The sinking of USS Guitarro was a gut punch and a lesson that stuck, but it didn't close a shipyard 27 years later. The real lever was the scale. After the Cold War, the Navy planned for fewer submarines and fewer big overhauls, and BRAC 1993 was built to turn that forecast into closures without getting trapped in local politics. Think of a shipyard as a power plant. Colossal fixed costs that only make sense at high load. Drydock number 1, finished in 1891, still worked, but the spreadsheets around it didn't. Nuclear-era maintenance required pricey upgrades, environmental stewardship added permanent chores, parallel facilities elsewhere could handle the slimmer fleet. On a national balance sheet, redundancy looks like waste. California argued the need and expertise. Vallejo showed faces and families. The commission weighed force structure, life cycle cost, and modernization, then marked a date. By April 1st, 1996, Mare Island's mission ended. Not for lack of skill, and not because of one accident, but because a smaller navy could not justify every yard it had inherited from a bigger navy. So the myth says a submarine sank and the yard sank with it. The mechanism says Congress built a process, the Pentagon ran the numbers, and a historic place became surplus to the plan. Mare Island didn't fail its time. Its time, defined by budgets, threats, and strategy, moved on. Stone stayed at Drydock number 1. Subscribe for more hidden history.